great to be here. It's my third time speaking at a White October event. I'm always blown away how thoughtful and well put together they are. I do think lead dev makes a meaningful contribution to what and how we work on together. So I think we're also lucky and fortunate that they do what we do. Anyway, my talk. So I'm going to be talking about microservices and monoliths, something that's kind of come up today already a little bit, and specifically Intercom's experience to date. Sometimes this topic goes viral online, while it's fun to read all of the hot takes, I think that the real world stories about all of the messy reality and sharing actually what happens and real complex things that kind of can happen is a lot more useful than the hot takes. Microservices are terrible, monoliths can't scale. But we've had a bunch of experience with this ourselves, so I'm going to share it to you. So the setup for this talk is we all know the story. There's a fancy new startup. They do useful things for the customers, and as a result, the business grows, and so do the number of people working on it, and success creates a lot of problems. And so you can end up fighting many fires at the same time, just maintaining product market fit, making sure that you've still got that trajectory, adding janky workarounds for your largest customers, keeping tests running, making sure that deployments don't take you down every day, and getting security improvements in place. And so there's just a lot of stuff. And so productivity grades, and the founders are wishing they could be back in the good old days of just being able to ship features to customers. It's no longer fun to work with the application. It's big and messy and horrible. And maybe some of the original developers have moved on, or maybe even to technical leadership. And teams feel unproductive, and they're kind of forced to talk to each other a lot to get anything done. And then eventually people start complaining about inconsistent coding styles and standards. There's a few nasty outages. You can't do your security upgrades. But fortunately, there's some well-known solutions to many of these problems, including breaking up the monolith becomes something that initially gets talked about in the pub after work, then escalates to chats in the office, and then eventually gets its way into some roadmaps. And ambitious engineers, why wouldn't they want to make their mark by supporting away from this pesky monolith? Who wouldn't want to contribute to the future of the business by building some amazing greenfield stuff? And this time, for real, we'll finally get ahead of all those quality, scalability, and coordination problems that have been slowing us down so much. Of course, I'm setting up a bit of a twist here, which is obvious from the title of the talk. So Intercom is kind of a big application for a Ruby on Rails app. I've been with Intercom for 11 years and joined it pretty early on, and now it's at a much bigger scale. And so I'm going to be talking about Intercom's architecture and scale. And so, when Intercom started a few years before I joined, it was just this fun little messenger for other B2B startups to talk to each other. But now it does a lot more, and of course we're all in on AI, which everyone is these days. So this is the first code commit to our Rails repository. So, the Rails app to this day is where the vast majority of our customer-facing requests are served, background jobs are processed, where all of our data is stored. And yeah, the first commit, obviously, in January 2011. And these days, we've got about 2.5 million lines of Rails code. About 60% of those are tests. It's not too bad. And we're typically running about 100K processes during peak on about 2,000 DC2 hosts, many different shapes and sizes, breaking about 150K web requests a second and 50K async jobs a second. So, big-ish. Not terribly big, but big-ish. And we also don't generally run our data stores or services. We are kind of quite principled and thoughtful about the way we go about our work in a way that kind of suits us. And I'll be talking about it a bit more in this, but we tend to outsource as much as possible. This graph could be anything really, but it is real. It's a honeycomb graph of web requests or something like that from this week. Come grab me at the office hours. We want to see the real dashboards. So, yeah, these days we're generally exceeding our availability SLOs. Our infrastructure cost margins are pretty solid. We deploy every 5 minutes or so to production. We run the 100K tests or so in less than 5 minutes, and we're just doing great. Business is doing well. So yeah, thanks for coming to my talk. The monolith is great. Okay, so getting to this point wasn't free. So you don't just wake up in the morning, decide to run at scale, take the code that's running sort of and run it at 100x. There's no runbooks, or you can't ask ChatGPT for this kind of thing. And also in the past, in our history, it looks like we may end up getting off the Rails app, or certainly would be far less important to us compared to it is today. So this is a highly scientific diagram of the timeline of our monolith. The start was like, things were nice and easy, fun, you got that nice growth trajectory, and then the middle was a mess, and then things kind of got stale again, and I think we're kind of on that side now. So I'm going to use the classic 3-act structure to describe the different phases of our architecture, how we thought about it at the time, and with most models and abstractions, 3 acts don't fit perfectly into actual facts, but it's a decent enough way to talk about how things went. It kind of lines up with that diagram. And so we certainly didn't know we were kind of in each act at each time. I'm pretty sure there might be some holes in my story as well, but this is all about a good story for you, you know? So the setup. Intercom was really nice back in the early days. It was just a small Rails app deployed to Heroku. But you know, back then, some important parts of our culture had been formed then. Intercom's a very product-oriented company, and our engineering team was pretty highly focused on impact, shipping to customers. We have a strong mindset of around getting our product into the hands of customers as fast as possible, learn and improve. And so I think our approach to technology choices was quite pragmatic from the very, very start. This kind of came from what the founders kind of believed in, or where we thought we should focus our work. But you know, we did have some pretty good values that have stayed true to this day, like shipping was our heartbeat. And again, we thought that the best way to build great product was get it in the hands of users as quickly as possible. And so using platforms like Heroku, which was pretty popular back then for Rails apps and stuff, it was a no-brainer almost at the time. And you know, this technology platform supported huge growth of the business. Intercom got like a lot of product market fit. And so a few things started changing. We started migrating from Heroku just to use, like, say, RDS hosted in AWS, and then later just fully moved into AWS to ensure that we could kind of continue to scale and integrate with other services like S3, ELB, Route 53, CloudFront, the works. We also wrote our little deployment tool in Ruby on Rails, which I do not recommend. Anyway, moving on fast. Moving on to Act 2, this is where I joined. So a lot of things happened here, including like hiring people like from FANG companies like myself. So product market fit is a curse and blessing, and we rapidly had to scale the team and the infrastructure. And so, you know, the funding rounds did help, but we also had to make a lot of big decisions technically. And we, you know, desperately needed something like Elasticsearch to power more data context queries that the MongoDB servers at the time were really struggling with. MySQL databases started having never-ending stability problems. We moved from RDS to Aurora when it came out, and that bought a lot of time. But still, we were like experiencing a lot of downtime. Tests were super flaky. They were getting in our way, and we, like, for a company that takes shipping very, very seriously, it's like basically a P1 event when our tests are blocking us, and it was like deeply uncomfortable for us that we had this platform which wasn't allowing us to do our jobs and was actively working against the way we thought we should work. And with this new wave of engineers joining, you know, there were general suspicions that Rails couldn't scale to fit our ambitions, and we needed new ways of doing things. And at the time, our nascent culture was around, or had a lot of strong ownership distributed out to teams, which is necessary for building great products. You know, you want teams to be self-sufficient, own their domains, able to make decisions locally, and similarly, that bled over to technology and architecture decisions. And so it wasn't due to like the suspicion that the Rails app or Rails wouldn't scale to absolutely large amounts of requests and stuff, and a lot of the kind of stability problems that we were experiencing and the Rails app not really fit in the business. It wasn't exactly controversial for teams to propose that we build new stuff out of the monolith. So let's go through some of the things that happened. We started building some new standalone or features in standalone applications. So we shipped like webhooks. When we built webhooks, we built this standalone service to deliver and kind of fan it out across multiple endpoints where the webhooks were going. And so that service there was this nice, fast Java service, and kind of looking to the futures, like we thought that maybe there would be webhooks coming from elsewhere that wasn't just the Intercom Rails app. So that was like a nice little standalone base, and I'll come back to that as well. And the Rails app communicated with these services over HTTP versus using internal load balancers.
I hope you're enjoying this video, but did you know Lead Dev has a lot more to offer?
When I think about lead dev, I think about bricks and hearts. Bricks are those foundational things that you need to know, and lead dev provides that through webinars, through videos, through cutting edge research. But hearts are the things that you need to glue yourself to the people at work. And lead dev does that through conferences and meetups.
Make sure you check out leaddev.com.
And we also built out things like, say, integrations with Shopify, and they were written as like small standalone Rails applications that could basically just talk to our public APIs. We also went through this Go phase as well, and so a few Go microservices kind of popped up as well. And when we built out a help center many years ago, it was also built out as this little standalone Rails app. We also extracted some stuff out of the monolith, so kind of de-monolith-ifying. And like billing is and still remains a big concern for Intercom. Billing is like, for Intercom, it's a load of synchronization of data between Salesforce and Zora, and you've got all these complex pricing plans, as well as getting data in and out of the Intercom app as well. And so the nature of this work and the nature of billing customers, it is like largely distinct from the job of serving like real customer requests. So it made kind of sense, and like wasn't the worst thing to bring out as something that was like relatively standalone. So I'm just going to like use some found objects. These are like directly just copy and pasted from a presentation about the success story of extracting the billing application out of the monolith. And basically the team looking after billing, they were very happy with the uptime and the CI of the continuous improvement of their application once it was no longer tied to the Rails monolith. This team as well happened to be based in San Francisco, so they would be blocked all day or having to escalate to people in Dublin or London just to get shipping again, and they didn't want to be coupled to all of the problems that we were having in the Rails app serving production traffic at the time. And as they say, working great so far. Around this time, like serverless launched, and I was like, that's kind of cool, and maybe we should build some stuff at Lambda. Like, we use it in a few places to hook up some of our use of AWS, just like small things like pre-processing data, like almost like stored procedures for stuff in AWS. And like at the time, we were just like open to the idea that serverless might give us this compute platform, which we would have to scale and think about it in a different way, but just wouldn't have all the same problems as our monolith would as well, and could open up a lot of productivity and speed. So kind of a distraction in the end, but like it was definitely something that we kind of looked at and we're kind of interested in, especially that we're all in on AWS. But at the same time, we were continuing to develop more of the core Intercom product on the Rails platform. And it didn't look like we were going to be doing many more extractions, certainly not for customer-facing stuff like we would to the billing application. And so we built new features like smart campaigns and different things, and extended core functionality. And we were still writing every day an awful lot of code in the Rails app. And so we were forced to mature the general environment of the Rails application. We invested in making observability great, adding Honeycomb as a way of being able to slice and dice high cardinality per customer metrics, and we built like custom SQL fingerprinting inside of our application, allowing us to deep dive into those wonky SQL queries which were taking us down all the time. We also engaged in the Ruby on Rails community. We were able to benefit from other businesses like Shopify who were at like a few orders of magnitude of scale bigger than us, and they were also quite motivated to contribute back to the community some of the things that they've done to help scale their business, and we were able to benefit from that, and like other contributions from GitHub, and we started to build more resilience in the system. Cared a lot about uptime. Our customers care a lot about our uptime, and things like circuit breakers, big red buttons to shut down functionality, automatically killing bad MySQL queries, just a lot of stuff across like every single database interaction, reducing the blast radius of every worker job, and HTTP endpoints, just like consistent dedication to try and make this application better. So we come to the final act of the talk. And it's going to be a bit longer than the other acts. So this is the stage that we're in, I think. So this is a slide that I've shamelessly copied and pasted with permission from Dan McKinley's Choose Boring Technology talk, which has been massively influential to me and others at Intercom. So we built lots of stuff, and they were working, and they were serving our customers, and there was stuff outside of the monolith. But the teams who ended up with the stuff that was outside of the monolith, they kind of ended up really disliking it. So we'd done all this cool stuff to make working in the monolith pretty good, great observability, scaling patterns that were well understood. Our platform team effectively was investing in like moving up the stack in the Rails monolith, and just years and years of getting good at it. And then also, we move people around Intercom a lot. There's like a lot of team fluidity. I'm going to mention this again. But often there was like nobody on the team running these services, which looked different to like most of the rest of their work. So like all of this stuff that goes into running things, we didn't get world class at this stuff outside of the monolith. And that was like deliberate decision. It's more impactful to do the work where you have more impact. And so it made total sense for us to invest in being great at this stuff in the monolith. And then the long tail of applications, we didn't do a terrible job. We weren't like completely neglectful, but they certainly weren't delightful to work in. And more importantly, the engineers hated working in them. So this, all of this stuff is like, no one enjoys doing a lot of this stuff. As Intercom matured, we started to get better understanding what success looked in our environment and our business. So our articulation of our Choose Boring Technology talk is like run less software, and it's kind of consistent with the ways that we had grown up, I guess, in terms of being all in on one cloud provider, using as many of their managed services as possible. And we wrote this up in a really good blog post called Run Less Software, and later was articulated as an engineering principle of being technically conservative. And like, not everyone should do this. This is stuff that worked well for us. It was like reflecting on our successes, things that worked well, and encoding that stuff to help aid and teach people about like the good default path for being successful at Intercom. And so these like artifacts, many of which are public, help us and guide us along these ways as we matured and grew up. So we just got good at many of the things that you have to do to keep the monolith running. Linting, upgrades, test reliability, speed. Code ownership's interesting. Like we made sure that every file basically has an owner encoded in it, and then that can be used later on for automatically inserting like ownership information into metrics and things like that. So it's easy to figure out who owns what, and just gives you out of the box really nice kind of ownership stuff when you're working in the monolith, and then using linters to make sure that this stuff is enforced and easily added on and maintainable for over time. Spent a lot of time fixing MySQL. We've just about got there. And just adding on more and more caching, scaling all the data stores, just all of these things. And so the other thing about the applications outside of the monolith, like they weren't like truly independent of the Rails application. They provided generally some simple abstractions that were starting to creak. So it wasn't like Steve Yeage's fictional interpretation of Jeff Bezos' mandate, where all teams were exposing their interfaces to each other cleanly, or they were fired. It's like we just built a load of stuff quickly outside of the monolith that happens to talk over a different interface, like HTTP in this case, because the monolith was in dire trouble. So the microservices we built, they weren't really speeding us up. They were kind of a short-term or medium-term solution to a problem. And the coordination problem, more importantly, between teams, where you need to talk to a lot of people to kind of get anything done. It wasn't a major issue in the first place. It certainly wasn't the incentive for building this stuff outside of our monolith application. And to add more features to things, we have to add more state to interfaces, mature how things like service discovery, and then you're thinking about security between all these different services, and just like maturing that layer would require like a lot of, again, consistent investment, and as well as adding overhead to all of the extent of and add complexity to the amount of work it takes to add any kind of feature or any improvements to the features that we had built outside of it. In the monolith as well, like we rewrote some core stuff, so we didn't completely avoid rewriting stuff, but we came back to things that either needed to be properly exposed internally in a kind of service-like interface, or we needed to do some sort of large migration. For example, we migrated off MongoDB onto DynamoDB for storage of our user and company data, which is a pretty large piece of company or data for us. And so we separated or split this out into a standalone piece of software inside of the Rails app, separated some data concerns, and then we're able to use this abstraction to be able to like swap out the database under the hood. And like just over time, just these kind of busy hot code areas or areas which were reused a lot or where we needed to do significant work on, they got like more investment, and over time, a bunch of services and patterns became, I guess, more common inside of the monolith, making it kind of nice and easy to work in. Okay, so when are we going to actually talk about monolith-ifying? So webhooks, I mentioned that earlier. More and more people were using our APIs, more customers built on top of Intercom, and now we had some huge customers, some really hot, bursty workloads, and people wanted to put a lot more information in, and we wanted to get more sophisticated about how we exposed webhooks and allowed our customers to manage them. So again, we would like have to either invest in making the webhook service, putting all the features in there in Java. No one wanted to write Java, or we could collapse it all down to the Rails monolith. And there was nothing wrong with this Java service. It was processing and delivering webhooks just fine. But we wanted to add more functionality. And now by this point, we'd realized this Rails thing, it can scale. And the reason why we wrote this stuff in the first place doesn't really exist anymore. And we reckon we can just knock out a bunch of Rails code to deliver the webhooks and then add the extra features on top of it that we were looking for. So the team went back to first principles. We didn't just decide to do it in Rails. We looked at maybe we should use Go or Perl, or but this time we got to do a good job in the Rails app. The Rails app was a lot more mature. We got to write adaptable, modular, well-organized code. We reused all of the well-established patterns in the Rails app. So this worked out very well for us. Help Center was like standalone Rails app. We just copied and pasted the code into Monolith. And similarly, these are like copy and pastes. And you can see that grasping code across two repositories was nasty. And there was a lot of upgrades and other issues that were causing the team's problems. Observability, developer ergonomics, availability, all these things were just fixed by a bunch of copy and paste into the Rails monolith. We've had some surprising benefits as well. We're quite fluid in Intercom. We move people around teams a lot. We're responsive to what's working in the business or what's happening in the marketplace. And having this monolith has allowed us to, every single feature is the same under the hood, basically. It's all a bunch of SQS queues and MySQL and Rails and stuff. And so this has allowed us to have people move around without that being like a barrier to joining a team and getting productive fast. Similarly, operations, really easy to standardize a bunch of stuff once you're in a single application. A good example of this is security upgrades. So to do security upgrades well inside a monolith, you have to basically have tests. No one individual can look at the changelog of something and decide, oh, I know that with the feature that that's going to affect. You have to rely on your tests. And so we've been able to fully do end-to-end automated security deployments from the Dependabot PR to being merged at a time that's good for us. And that's just enabled by having all of the scar tissue and all these tests and layers of checks and balances to make sure that we can ship fast and fully automated to production. Also, 6 years ago, I spoke to lead dev about on-call and was talking about volunteer-based on-calls and how it's so great and everyone should do it. And I quickly realized after the talk, when I was talking to people afterwards, that I think our socio-technical environment really enables our ability to share on-call and have one person on-call for all of Intercom. And again, the monolith is a big enabler of this. I kind of didn't grok it so much at the time. And AI, this wouldn't be a talk in 2025 with a mention of AI, but tending to a monolith requires a lot of gardening work, cleaning up dead code, standardizing patterns, refactoring, cleaning up stale feature flags. And some of these are really well understood tasks, to the extent that we already had automation that was kind of opening up issues and stuff like that for teams. But now we can just point the issues at a LLM bot. We have these pipelines, and they open the PRs and just remove a lot of friction and allow us to do this gardening with as little work as possible. We've loads more work to do. We still have some Java running. Hopefully AI will make that easier to remove. And some lessons. I think our 3-act structure can be applied to any messy circumstances. I think in our case, the architecture didn't come from any lofty architectural decisions. I think life is messy, and we evolved here through experimentation and figuring what works out for us. But sticking to our core principles of shipping as our heartbeat, shipping to learn, reflecting honestly on what's working well and what's not, I think it's kept us on a solid path. So I think staying simple, running less software, focusing on impact has worked out well for us. And here's the slide again. Thank you for coming to my talk.